Welcome back to Let's Talk Security Testing, the podcast where we talk all things security testing. Today we're going to talk about a buzzword that is been forgotten, I think, or not forgotten, but certainly is not as hot as it was. And the buzzword is PTaaS, pen testing as a service. Now, what really bugs me about PTaaS is, I think I spoke on PTaaS at a conference about 3 years ago. And my talk or my rant was about how I think it's one of the most poorly defined terms in the industry. And I think you get such a wide range of interpretations of what PTaaS is. And I think that's now gone full circle because I feel like it's sort of fading away without ever really being properly defined. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been defined multiple times by different vendors as different things. I think, the instinct is to jump on the band. It's a bandwagon kind of a buzzword, isn't it? It's we sell pen testing. People are modernizing pen testing. We need to make it sound like we differentiate or we modernize as well. We better start calling our solution PTaaS and just tweak something.
I feel like the only, and this is, again, I'm going back 3 years here, but I feel like the only umbrella definition that encapsulates, mom and pop shop pen testing companies, VC-backed pen testing companies, bug bounty companies, is MSPs, is penetration testing with a digital interface of some kind. I feel like that is the prerequisite for PTaaS. The as a service bit is kind of meaningless, other than it's pen testing, but throughout the process of getting this pen test, you will likely touch a piece of software.
Yeah, it's AAS effectively stands for not a PDF to some extent.
No. That there is definitions of PTaaS that don't fall out of that, because some of these platforms, the PDF is uploaded and you can then go and download the report from a digital place, which in theory is PTaaS.
In theory, well, I tell you what, let's
it matches the definition.
Let's rather than trying to just define it ourselves, try and recall what happened a few years ago. Let's look to the internet as a source.
Oh God,
of questions.
Whereabouts on the internet are you planning on going here?
Reddit.
Oh God. Oh, this could be fun.
So we were looking on Reddit a little while back, and there's a few subjects over the year, a few topics of conversation. And the first one that really caught my eye was one posted titled, "What the hell is PTaaS?"
There we go. I think we just got the name of the pod. Or maybe we'll call the pod, "Where the hell has PTaaS gone?"
Now, this person actually, they pose a few questions in this. So they start by saying, "I've noticed a few posts lately where PTaaS is mentioned." I should say this was a post 2 years ago when it was more of a hot topic. Yep. However, everyone's interpretation of it is wildly different. They then go on to say, is it an actual service that's somehow different to normal pen testing? So why don't we start there? Is it a service that's different to normal pen testing?
No. I feel like 80% of the pen testing that gets. I feel like 80% of the pen testing that gets bought for compliance reasons, and quite often at scales where you might need 3 or 4 of these a month if you've got let's say 30, 40 apps in the business. So no, I don't think it requires a different. You can't really change the service because ultimately there's need for someone to come in your business for 5 days and test an app and at the end of the test, provide you with some level of output. So I think in the large part, taking that away would be ostracizing a large portion of the need for pen testing.
Yeah.
But I think there's an awful lot that goes into the before and after that absolutely does not need to be done in a traditional way and can be done in a much more modern digital way. So I think at least part of PTaaS would need to capture that.
Okay, so leads nicely on to the second question. Is it just a mechanism for how pen testing gets delivered, i.e. via a portal, on-demand reports, etc.?
I think that's part of it. I think if that's all it is, then I would argue that is, not it's pen testing, but we have a portal. I don't think there's enough value add there to give it its own unique identifier. I think if I was looking to define the sort of benchmark for what PTaaS needs to be, I think there's got to be a bit of before and a bit of after. I've been in this industry for as long as I have. There's, an awful lot of pain goes into deciding you need a test, going through the process of getting that test started, signing all the relevant paperwork, booking it in. And then afterwards, you've obviously got more than just delivering the results in a digital format. You've got being able to capture that in multiple different forms. So if you need a PDF, I can get a PDF. If I need to ship those vulnerabilities out, I can ship them out into Jira or whatever my developers want to do them. You've obviously got things like aftercare, including like retesting. So how easy is it to procure a retest? It's so common, right? Developers now fixed it. That report is no good to me. I need a report that shows that that's been fixed. Happens on like more than 50% of pen tests.
Yeah.
All of that, I think, needs to be baked in some capacity to be able to not necessarily, I'm not going to say to call it PTaaS like I'm somehow the protector of the word PTaaS, but in order for it to be uniquely identified beyond, we're a pen testing company with a portal.
Okay. Here's one slightly shifting pace a little bit. Is it a fancy way of saying we will do non-stop attacks on your systems and show you results over time?
Look, I have no issue with that because it fits the standard for what is effectively SaaS, right? SaaS should really be always on. You should be able to get the whole SaaS era was about being able to extract continuous value with continuous. Like, look, what was pre-SaaS? Pre-SaaS, we were buying licenses for stuff that didn't change, right? You'd get a disc. On the back of that disc, look, there's be people listening that said there was a before discs, right? But there's a disc. On the back of that disc is a key. The key and the disc allow you to capture that, and you own that. You own the use of that, but it will never be updated. It will never change. I think obviously in the SaaS era that changed, but I think in order for it to, I have no issue with this additional option, this continuous side of things. What I do have an issue with though is, and I've said this on the pod before, so I'm not going to bore people with what my rant about continuous and not continuous. But I do think there needs to be some transparency with the definition of continuous. So, all out attack, whatever you said, to me that sounds like marketing speak that is almost impossible to do, but it's kind of easily to defend against.
Well, it says non-stop attacks and that shows you results over time. I think the results over time is the more important part of that to some extent, right? Pen testing, one of the problems that we've always spoken about has been that it is a point-in-time snapshot of the security of a system. So I think it is an interesting conversation to have about whether or not PTaaS should or could be a means of being able to not just say how secure were you on the 4th of...
I think the two are needed together, though. I feel like you see this a lot with PTaaS. We get an annual pen test, and then they say, one of the features of this is that we'll show you results over time. And it's like, I get one test a year. I don't think results over time on one test a year is particularly valuable. A lot happens in a year. Like, you could have a negative graph or a positive graph. I don't think it's telling you a lot because, you might have tripled the size of the development team, tripled the output. If you were then seeing less vulnerabilities, like that would be, like you would expect to see more and you're still doing quite a good job. So, I think some form of continuous with life cycle or over time tracking, I think the two go really well together.
And the next question makes me think, actually, just looking through these. So mechanism for how pen testing gets delivered, portal on-demand reports, etc. So software enabled. Next question, non-stop attacks, kind of continuous testing. The next question is it something for only internet-facing assets? Which immediately screams to me that what this person's considering whether PTaaS is like attack surface management, right?
Yeah.
Which is an interesting point. But I wonder if the reason we don't hear PTaaS, I'm starting to think, so much anymore is because actually it's pen testing companies trying to differentiate, and what they've done is differentiated in a lot of different ways, and actually those ways have now defined their own categories. Just moving on to the next one, is it mostly just automated scanners and pretty dashboards?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a large part, yes. As I said earlier, the human part doesn't scale very well. So you can do the before and the after, but the during's like really hard to fit into a SaaS context. So, if you were trying to build a pure SaaS company and, this is where the sort of VC interference comes in, it's very, very difficult if you can't speed up the during. So I think a lot of these PTaaS companies, yes, you are ultimately going to get an automated scan, which might come with a badge on, because people can put their badge on anything they choose to. It's not their job to manage your compliance at the end of the day. They can also be a Crest company and run a vulnerability scan. The two are not separate. Just because you're a Crest company doesn't mean that what you've just done is a Crest pen test. But then at the same time, you're paying pen test money for something that you can do yourself. You can just get Zap, run a scan, and see the equivalent output to what you've just paid a pen test for. So if anything, it might seem cheap, but you're actually radically overpaying for something.
And then speaking of that question, the cheaper question, is it a way of selling pen testing that's backed by the gig economy or cheap offshore teams?
Either or. Again, I've no issue with this. This is freedom of choice. The gig economy is a fantastic way of delivering on speed. Pen testing companies are notorious for really long lead times, and customers are notorious for, can I have a pen test tomorrow? The gig economy has downsides. You're not full-time employees. You don't necessarily know who's doing the job. They might not be familiar with your system. Depending on which bug bounty company you're looking at for this will dictate the quality of their researchers. But you will get someone much faster, potentially, than you would from a traditional pen testing company. So I have no issue with the innovation going on under the hood now. I think whether it's gig economy, whether it's offshore, whether it's onshore, all of those can fit nicely into a PTaaS model.
And I think as well, some of the earliest people to describe themselves as PTaaS, also certainly some of the earliest people to successfully build a business describing themselves as PTaaS, people were leaning on that gig economy model quite heavily, and that was a big part of what defined those companies as PTaaS, at least, even if it's not what defines every company as PTaaS.
Definitely.
I'm going to save the next question because I think it follows on to a nice little round off of this post. So I'll skip over it for a second and instead go to, is it a faster or cheaper version of a pen test?
It can be. A lot of pen testing companies in their traditional context are charging for all of that kind of baggage that comes with the process. Many people are needed to do jobs that software can do. Think of schedulers, admin people sending out the paperwork, people receiving the paperwork. So all of that cost can effectively be passed on to the consumer. So I wouldn't read necessarily too much into the faster, cheaper piece as a sort of absolute way of saying that this is somehow less quality. But it's rife. Right, it's rife. So it's just more reason to do proper due diligence. I don't think PTaaS is alone in this. If we had a buzzword for every minutiae of every category, there'd be more buzzwords than we have now. And I don't think anybody in the industry is crying out for an increase in the number of buzzwords that we use. Like imagine PTaaS with extra letters on. Like that would just be like, so like, look, there's no solution to this other than to sort of set what the baseline is and for people to do their research into, I'm interested in the PTaaS category. What are the options? And I would say those options are a version of traditional, a version of continuous, a digital offering all the way through the process, and then a distributed delivery model from crowd resource to fully employed.
And one of the things I think is worth noting about it as well is differentiating based on being faster or cheaper. There's nothing wrong with that. One of the things, obviously, I've said is that I think that PTaaS to some extent is pen testing businesses just trying to say we are differentiated. And for the longest time, most pen testing businesses say they differentiate. When you challenge them on why they differentiate, a point you've made before, they usually say because we do better job, we got more talented people and we write better reports, and that quality was the only aspect in which any pen testing company believed it could differentiate. But actually, the market isn't that one-dimensional, right? There are people who need things faster. There are people who need things cheaper. And so leaning into that makes a lot of sense for a lot of businesses. And then finally, is PTaaS a newer and sexier version of a pen test? I saved that because I think it's well rounded off with what they write at the end, which just says, just when I thought the industry was making good progress on finally coming to terms with what a pen test actually is and is not, this comes along and confuses the shit out of everybody again.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. But I think, unfortunately, this is the industry that we live in, and I don't think PTaaS is alone in this. I just think it's a shame that we've not been able to get to the bottom of it. Okay. Appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. And we'll catch up next week.
Bye now.